This morning we've come together as Transport for the North and we've agreed a set of principles that we're going to go back to the government with. There was complete unity in the room today. All political parties, businesses have come together and we've come up with a resolution. I'm just going to read it out so that I get the words right. So the first one is that the publication of the government's integrated rail plan and the announcement of associated investment is noted, and that the proposals breach the commitments government had previously made on Northern Powerhouse Rail and differ from this board's preferred option as set out in statutory advice to the Department of Transport. So we've made it very clear, everybody was in agreement with that, and now we want to go back to government. We have a plan. We need to deliver all of NPR if we're going to meet the economic ambitions for the North and our decarbonisation strategy. So we will be going back to government.
The way you're working with government at Transport for the North is changing from co-client to co-sponsor. First of all, what do you make of this change, and what do you think that says about the government's commitment to levelling up?
We're still trying to understand what co-sponsor and co-client actually means. We still provide statutory advice to the government, and it's clear that that's not going to change. I think we've got an opportunity, and it was discussed today, we can actually frame what we think that means so that we can help the government move forward with their levelling up ambitions for the North.
And if I could, just a question to Tracy and Andy. You spoke about today in the questions, the Prime Minister saying that the Leeds to Manchester leg with the stop in Bradford didn't make economic sense. Just what are your takes on that?
Well, certainly he's promised Northern Powerhouse Rail, so at one point it made economic sense for him. But we know as leaders for our region that this is an opportunity to unlock the potential, that we know this will make economic sense. You can't leave out Bradford, the youngest city, the least connected city, and then expect it to flourish and to level up with the rest of the country. We want a conversation with government to talk about how we have a debate around how we make that those numbers work, and make sure that government really understand that we know our region, and certainly for the government to say it doesn't make economic sense when there are some of the numbers in the document that we've got that seem very vague and not backed up by evidence and detail. So it's an opportunity for us to reach out to government.
Just to back that up, I mean, if you go back to the original George Osborne vision of the Northern Powerhouse, it was all about a new rail line, he called it HS3 at the time, uniting the great cities of the North to unlock their economic potential. So it was a vision founded on the economic sense of bringing the northern cities closer together. So I'm very surprised to hear that comment. I mean, we had a bit of a bombshell dropped on us last week. I mean, Manchester didn't suffer as badly, certainly, as Tracy, Steve and other colleagues, Dan and Jamie and Louise. You know, so we recognise that. However, it's still the case that what unites all of the cities represented here, the east-west connectivity across the north, is by far and away the biggest concern in the minds of our residents. That's what they think is the problem. And the IRP didn't fix that, and that's why it was a bombshell for all of us. You know, what we've done today, as Louise said, is come back together. We've picked ourselves up and we've tried to come back with a positive suggestion to move things forward. And the idea, not that we want to do it necessarily, but the idea of looking again at this with potentially a local contribution, given that the value of land along these lines would rise if we were committing to the full vision that was originally proposed by Transport for the North of the Northern Powerhouse Rail. You know, we could look at capturing that value with the government, and that being the contribution that helps us get the new line via Bradford. So we're coming back stronger today. From our point of view, to answer the economic sense point, Manchester Airport's being asked to make a contribution to HS2 at Manchester Airport. What they say to me is if Bradford is connected by part of that infrastructure, then it makes sense to make that contribution, because the economic benefit of that would make the local contribution doable. When you have the substandard version of what's being proposed, the economic benefit isn't the same, therefore there isn't the case to make the contribution. So genuinely, I don't understand what the Minister has said in the Commons today. It doesn't make sense. But give us the best version, and then that unlocks the most benefit to the economy, and we can capture some of that to pay back for the cost of the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Hi, Vicky from LBC and Global Radio. I'm just wondering, when you say local contributions, to clarify, do you mean that potentially people in the north are seeing a tax?
No, definitely not. And so let me just be clear about that. What we're proposing is, when you commit to a line, you raise value of some of the land across that line. If you take Bradford, for instance, land values would increase in a city centre like Bradford. And other countries around the world give powers, parliamentary powers at a local level, to capture that value to help pay for the infrastructure, rather than letting it become a windfall at a local level. So that is what we're saying. Land value capture is what it's called, to then help pay for the infrastructure, and not, absolutely not, a tax on local people.
Go ahead, we're going quickly.
Okay, sorry. Just when the Prime Minister was in the North East this week, he said that Northern leaders in their criticism are talking absolute tripe. I mean, what's your response to that?
Well, I would completely disagree. And if he'd have been in the meeting today, he'd have seen a lot of respect, a lot of innovation, a lot of openness to stand together and to speak as the voice of the passenger in West Yorkshire, but also of those communities that are disconnected. And also just to say, with just one line, you do not increase capacity. So you don't have those stopping trains in those communities. You just have these through trains, city to city. So when we're talking about land value and about businesses benefiting, those stopping trains with a new line, a Northern Powerhouse Rail, you can have that greater expansion for business and also opportunities for young people to get to jobs, get to training, get to opportunities.
I'll simplify for the Prime Minister. This is not about broom brooms, this is about choo-choo trains. And the more people we get out of cars and into public transport and well-funded and well-connected public transport, then the better it'll be for the environment.
Chris Byrne, Yorkshire Post. I appreciate what you're saying about land value capture, but the gap between what was announced by the government and the full Northern Powerhouse Rail Plan is about £25 billion. Is land value capture going to cover that gap?
Well, that's why we're talking about it in terms of a local contribution. If you look at this over 100 years, a line that connected Liverpool, Manchester Airport, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds, and then beyond, Sheffield, and then up to the North East, and making journey times much quicker between Manchester and the North East, it will boost the northern economy for a century. And what we're asking the government is to look at it in that way. Every one of us would be letting down the future generations of the north if we sat there today and said this is good enough for the north for the rest of this century, because we know in our hearts that it isn't. We know it doesn't solve the problems. We know it doesn't give the capacity uplift. We know it doesn't give the connectivity to places like Bradford. And when you take a new line out of Manchester and join it up with Victorian congested infrastructure halfway between Manchester and Leeds, we know we're going to face massive disruption for our residents in the building of that line. So we all know it's the wrong solution. And what we're doing today is saying, look at this, the north of England over the next century, what you would unlock by building the right infrastructure and then capturing the value from that to help pay for it.
But the government going to have to meet you halfway. You know, presumably 25 billion isn't going to be northern contribution.
Well, that's you used that figure. I don't think we know that because the detail hasn't been given to us. As that was what the meeting heard.
The Northern Powerhouse Rail project, whose figures were accepted today, said 17.2 billion, and the previous plan was 42 billion. So there is a considerable gap.
You've got to separate cost from investment. If you create the right infrastructure and you consider it an investment in a bigger northern economy, you capture value in a different way. If you purely look at this through a lens of cost, as I think the government are doing, you don't see that bigger picture. And actually, if you build this solution, what's the detriment to the Merseyside economy in the short term of causing the disruption that Steve spoke about in the meeting? So, yeah, I'll let Dan or Jamie come in, but, you know, it's about what is right for the north of England in the long run. This country has got a terrible kind of problem with short-termism, just the short-term cost and not seeing the bigger picture. And I think that's the trap the government has fallen into.
The figures that were published in the IRP when you're talking about the economic benefits, and it listed Newcastle and the North East, and it was a tiny, tiny little uplift on that graph. We invest, then we are leading the way on the green economy. There's so many other things about the North East that are developing our economy. This is going to hold us back. You've got to look at the cost of what it is to not do it.
I think what we've seen this morning, and we've seen it over the past few days, is a real consensus from leaders across the north of England that what the government delivered nationally is not the right solution for the north of England, and I think most of us think it doesn't come even close to being the right solution for passengers across the north of England. So what this is the beginning of a grown-up conversation with government to explore the art of the possible, and I think we've seen some really useful and interesting suggestions come out of this meeting this morning. I still think, though, what we want to do is continue to make the case for the government to actually do what they'd originally committed to do. You know, governments change their minds. U-turns are made. This government has made quite a few of them. So I don't see this as being the end of the line. But in the meantime, you know, we are the people who have responsibility to deliver the best results for our passengers. So we're exploring what might be possible and seeking to engage in a conversation about how we can move forward.
And if I might just add that other members of Parliament across the whole of the region have also made the case in Parliament that this is not going to work for them and their citizens. So whilst we represent our communities, there are also members of Parliament who were elected in who are also making the case. So it's trying to have that dialogue that we're not going to accept what we've been given, and this is an opportunity to make it better. And actually, as a Yorkshire woman who really does know the value of things, to actually make sure that we get value for money, because if we do it in this way, we're going to have to do it all over again in a decade's time.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a phrase, isn't there, that they know the cost of everything and the value of nothing, and I think this is a really good example of that. And, you know, I'm so passionate about the decarbonisation. We're fighting to protect the planet, and I just think that if the government can really come and talk to us, and I think that's our message today, come and talk to us. We've got a solution. We've got the evidence, and we're still waiting for their evidence, and that'll be interesting when that's released. But we can demonstrate that value of what we're doing rather than just the cost.
And just on, I'm just going to do my bit, James, if you don't mind. So in the Liverpool City region, we're doing some modelling now, and we're looking at what the economic detriment will be with the disruption over an extended period in comparison with what the benefits would be of the investment of new rail. And it looks as if it would be better with the sub-optional option that's on the table not to do that because of the knock-on effects of the visitor economy over that period of time. So we're going to look at that really carefully now. It's something I did warn the government of, so this is not a surprise to them. I asked them to look at these figures. They obviously haven't done it, and now we're getting spurious claims, and we just need the evidence, which is what we've asked for today.
Excuse me, we've got only got 5 minutes left, so I thought if we go here and then Bill from the left at the back, a couple of them, we've got one from online.
Right, Philip Hay from Round Magazine. The IRP seems to use your enthusiasm for East-West for NPR as a reason to drop High-Speed 2's Eastern Leg. How will you now recover that and get the Eastern Leg built?
Then building up after yours does come back to get these things.
Government gave the backing to the Northumberland line after a lot of campaigning. Why do you think they're not listening on the Leamside line?
Okay, so if we talk about the eastern leg of HS2, we need to go back to that because NPR is part of a bigger. It's the whole thing that needs to be delivered, not picking bits and bobs from it. It has to be the whole thing. That is what our modelling for the economic benefits, for capacity, for speed, for the decarbonisation. It's the whole picture that has to work. So we're not accepting, oh well, we'll negotiate and do that for that. We want all of it delivered. In terms of, obviously, it's the eastern leg's impacting on Sheffield and Leeds, but Northumberland?
The Northumberland line actually uses land value capture. We're already doing it. We have to do it by negotiation with landowners at the moment. That needs to be put on a statutory footing. If we have those powers, we can massively accelerate these things. They literally generate wealth when you build a new railway line and a new railway station. So why should that go as a windfall to speculators? It should be coming for the benefit of the people that we're all elected to serve.
James Jordan's one line, I believe it's Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte Cox, MEN, asked Smith Andy Burnham, how might it work in practice to unlock land value in the north to fund a new line between Manchester and Leeds?
And if you could respond to that, Canberra, TFS Canberra, shoot watch.
In what, sorry? Okay, no problem. Just about, before I do answer directly, I just want to pick up Steve Rotherham's point. I mean, it's such an important point, and it answers the colleague who asked the question about the funding gap before. It's very, very important when we evaluate the benefits of the new line over the solution that was proposed. What is the cost of the new line in terms of the impact on the economy, i.e. the more disruptive effect? That is absolutely got to be in the mix here when we have that discussion with the government, and it's such an important point. To the degree that Steve thinks it's in the balance, whether it's even worth having it because of the disruptive effect of that. But how might it work in practice? It's about sitting down with the government and saying, should we do something that is common in other places around the world, Hong Kong, for instance, where they have legislation in place that allows a new line to be planned and then the windfall uplift, as Jamie said, to be collected from the rising land values on that line, not just immediately, over the years actually, that then help pay for that infrastructure in the long run. And many other countries use this. We've never used it in this country, and I think it's a reflection of the fact that we've never had devolved entities that have been able, set up to capture this land value uplift. But if you look at it now, we have combined authorities neighbouring across this corridor from the Liverpool City region through Greater Manchester now to West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire. You've got contiguous combined authorities that together, if we work together and the government gave us legislation to work together, we could capture the value of the new line. And then hopefully we could work with Jamie as well as we seek to bring in that Leamside line. So this is what we're saying. We've got a very old school approach here where the government just sits there and says to different parts of the country, oh, we're going to give you this and that's all you're going to get and that's it. We're calling for a new approach. Sit down round the table with us. It's a positive suggestion that we're making today. Consider how you can unlock the local contribution to get the right solution for the north of England. And we think that's a positive thing that we're doing today. It was cross-geography across the north. It was cross-party. Business leaders around the table supporting it as well. The north has spoken with one voice today and is saying to the government, get back round the table for us, and all of us, let's keep high ambitions for the north of England rather than downgrading them at this particular moment in time, and we just cannot accept that today.
Okay, I think we're going to have to call it a day. We've got a partnership board now, so thank you for the questions. We will be releasing our motion once we've just typed it up neatly.
Are there any chance of quick ones for us with Dan or Tracy for Look North and Calendar, please?
That's one thing you have to take off separately because we have to do it. If you have any questions or copies